So I'm gonna start off with a very important piece of information. In roughly 7-ish hours, the teaser and title for Star Wars Episode 9 is gonna be online. So we should all leave right now, go back to our hotel rooms and just wait there. Refresh, refresh, refresh. Yeah, so they're having Star Wars Celebration in California, I think, and 11 a.m. CST is when the panel starts. And at the end, they'll probably do the title and the teaser and all that, and it'll be great and awesome, and we will all love it. I am a little bit of a Star Wars fan. I'm very public about that, so that should not be news to you. So I am Raymond Camden, obviously. I'm a developer experience person at American Express, and I'm supposed to have a slide about how I don't represent American Express, blah, blah, blah. I'm too lazy to copy and paste legalese. Just know that I do not speak for them in any way whatsoever. My website is raymondcamden.com. You can also email me if you have any questions. And you should absolutely follow me on Twitter, where I only tweet very important technical stuff that is crucial to your day-to-day development, experience, learning, etc. No, it's 90% cats, 8% Star Wars, and 2% tech. I've had a few people ask about Louisiana. That's where I'm from, East Texas, essentially. You may have seen things about my home state on TV and at the movies. I'm here to tell you it's 100% true. Everything you have read, we are mostly swamp. I live in a swamp right now. I actually don't have cats. I have 5 alligators. We do eat a bit of gumbo, and yes, every other person is a vampire. 100% true. No, if you actually visit the state and just go to New Orleans, just please don't assume the rest of the state is quite that naughty. It's about half that naughty. All right, so a bit more about my favorite topic, me. I started playing with the web a long time ago. I remember downloading Netscape betas. I remember LiveScript when it came out. I can remember building JavaScript sample applications where I'd have to reboot my machine to get things back. I love that. I have dabbled in native development, mainly iOS. I learned Objective-C. And the biggest thing that I learned is that I don't want to write Objective-C. That's not saying it's a bad language. It's a very good language that I don't want to write ever again. I haven't tried Swift, so Swift may make it a bit more fun. I did use Flex Mobile. Woohoo, Flex? Nobody. Okay, well, so if you don't know what Flex was, it was an Adobe thing that allowed you to use Flex to build native applications. Remember the whole big war, Flash and Apple? Yeah, guess who won that? Who was surprised that who won that? Yeah, I was not surprised at all. And most of my time in the last couple of years has been working with Apache Cordova and PhoneGap and just general web stuff as well. About 2 years ago, I first started working with Vue.js. Now, I really like Vue. It's okay if you don't. You're wrong. But it's totally fine to prefer Angular or React. No, you can't like React. You can like Angular, you can like Vue. For me, the biggest thing about Vue is that it's really simple. And that's totally arbitrary, personal, whatever. I have used Angular for a few years. I still consider myself a beginner at it because I think it's the type of platform that needs 10 years before you're really good at it. With Vue, I felt a lot more it was just easier to get into and easier to use. And you don't have to use a Vue process. Now, Vue has a CLI. It uses Webpack. It has, 10,000 NPM files and all that. But when you're learning, and for some examples, you can just use a script tag, which is really nice. And it's amazing. I never really thought about it, but when I'm learning something, if I know that I know that I have to scaffold an application and do a build to learn one small little feature, I kind of put that off. I kind of feel like, oh, it's going to take a whole minute to do this, and that's not bad. And obviously, NativeScript has a build process, but just knowing that there's an easier way to test something, skipping the command line, going to a tool like CodePen, makes it much more inviting to learn. So like my experience with learning Vue was building 1,000 small little sample apps in CodePen, testing one small feature at a time with a startup of about 5 or so seconds. Now I'm pretty sure that Angular also supports running on CodePen as well. I'm not saying you can't do that simple type thing with Angular, but just my experience is that it's never been that easy to kind of start up and try new things. I love that Vue supports non-web applications. This may be crazy, but there's still people who use JavaScript and don't build Gmail. They don't build web apps. They have a form. They want a tiny bit of interactivity. They don't need a single page application. I love that Vue fits really, really nice into that space. And also, I'm building the big honking application. I need all the widgets and Webpack and blah, 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 blah. With having Vue support all those use cases, I feel much more comfortable saying that it's mine. You know, I think Vue understands the way that I want to work. I want a simple one-page CodePen when I'm trying one particular small thing, and I want the whole build honkin' CLI process when I'm doing something a bit more intense. So yeah, I really, really do like Vue. I think it's great. It's awesome. And I also love NativeScript as well. So I've been dabbling in it. It's how old now? 4 years? Somebody here knows how old NativeScript. This is embarrassing. Yeah, I'm looking at you guys. 4 years? 5. Okay, so when it first came out, I liked it. I played with it. And it was one of those technologies where I would tell my friends at Progress, I like it. I'm really going to blog on it a lot more this year. And every year, I never got the time or the bandwidth to play with it a bit more. And then something kind of magical happened, like the perfect storm of I had a client. And the client came to me and said, we have this Apache Cordova application with Angular. That's actually the application I worked on and I built for them. And they said, we really want to convert this to NativeScript. And we want you to try. Now me, what I heard as a person who bills by the hour, oh, you want me to try and learn something, and if I fail, that's totally fine, but I could learn, and you could pay me, and if I don't get it right, that's okay. So I had this opportunity to kind of look at not only getting more into NativeScript, but this was also right about the time where NativeScript-Vue was launching, and I had the chance to kind of use both of those together, and it ended up being pretty much exactly as I expected. Peanut butter and chocolate, two really, really good things together. You can only make this better if you included cats somehow. And guess what? If you Google for something and cats, you will always find it. Aww, isn't that? Yeah, I'm totally using this, yes, just to make you happy. All right, so it was really, really great, but it was also good and also not as good. So I'm not avoiding the word bad because I was given a trip out to Amsterdam and I want to fly home and I don't want to make anybody mad. But no, honestly, there were really, really good things that I liked, and things that were just not as good, things that surprised me, and things where my years of Just Web and my years of Cordova experience gave me assumptions that I had to kind of readjust. So most of the rest of this talk is primarily about the things where I thought so-and-so, and I had to kind of rethink or reframe that in NativeScript to kind of go forward. Nothing bad at all, just, oh, I used to do things this way, and here is how I'll do things under NativeScript. So let's start with the good stuff. So again, I did play with NativeScript when it first came out. I remember the installation being less than optimal. It worked, but it was a process. Now, to be fair, all mobile dev 4 or 5 years ago was a process. When I used to give intro to PhoneGap type talks, I would always tell people, yeah, there's a documented way to get simulators in the Android framework. It's all documented. Plan a day, like a day. So I don't call out NativeScript for being any worse. in that regards. But having to set up the environment on a new laptop, it went a heck of a lot quicker. So it was nicer. And again, if I was speaking to primarily a web crowd who was thinking about NativeScript, I would talk about actually be able to show it in a much quicker form. Android simulation, that went from so bad you can actually go to Best Buy and get an Android phone and come back and your Android simulator will still be starting up. It's gone from that to not quite as, no, to a heck of a lot faster. Yeah, so again, giving those intro to Cordova talks, you know, obviously anytime you talk mobile dev, when you can simulate, you always say test on a real device, and that obviously applies to our world as well. But in the beginning, for Android especially, it was like day one, go buy a device, whether you're an iPhone lover or not, get the hardware. Now it's a heck of a lot faster, it's a lot more performant, it's just a much better tool in general. It's like shockingly fast sometimes. I will think, oh, I have time to go get a cup of coffee, and it just pops up. Now, to be fair to Android, whenever I would complain about this on Twitter, people would say, oh, the iOS simulator is doing a lot less than what Android does. And I could tell you, so, you know, working with developers, they don't care. You may have a valid reason for why your tool is 10 times slower, fix it. Or make another tool that at least simulates the faster speed, just make it work. So someone on the Android SDK or some team did whatever they had to do to make it a much better experience. The other thing that really surprised me, again, kind of coming into NativeScript every now and then, seeing both the Playground and the Preview app was a huge, huge thing for me, especially in terms of I'm building a large application that had multiple steps, login, a list of records, click a record, here's an edit form, click that to go into a subform. Oh, I have a bug here. One of the first things I found out while I was building, even with the HMR hot module reload, whatever type thing, I found myself having to restart the application again and again and do click, 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 click. What I found is that if I go into the Playground, I could build a quick proof of concept for that one particular small thing that was not working well. Just test that and have a great turnaround. I would keep my local environment, my command line running, talking to my application, and do a separate application in the Playground and to test whatever. Also, I'm still learning NativeScript. Having the Playground makes it just a quicker route for me to try one particular small feature. So I'm assuming most people here are using it. The only issues I've run into so far are with plugins. In fact, so my last blog entry on geolocation, that was a plugin that would not work in the Playground. Outside of that, my biggest issue has been the UI stuff, and the Playground's been great for testing that. Even more good stuff. So yeah, I know Vue, 2 years or so. I still think I have more years to go, more to learn. I don't think I know everything about Vue.js, but having that knowledge already there, bringing it into NativeScript land was great. You know, I never felt that I was extremely good at Angular. I feel like I got pretty good at Vue pretty quickly because of how easy it is. Using that in NativeScript was just a great combination. I'll also point out CodePen, when it's running, I know it's running for me right now, has the ability to create a template. So when you make a new CodePen, create yourself a template that has Vue.js already in there, and you can get started even quicker. So 9 times out of 10, if I'm testing something with Vue.js, I don't go to my file system. Instead, I go to CodePen, make a new pin from that template, and then just test whatever. Even with the NativeScript application I'm building for that client, I'll still use CodePen for proof of concepts along with the Playground. So things that were not as good, and again, these are not bugs, issues, bad things with NativeScript. These are all things where my assumptions hit a brick wall, sometimes a bit painfully, and I had to kind of readjust and learn a bit. So in general, it's going to be plugins, the router, JavaScript, and the user interface stuff. I'm going to go into detail about each of these. So for plugins, anybody here a Apache Cordova PhoneGap user? A good chunk. So one of the things that Cordova did was they had like their core framework, but they had about 12 or so plugins that were considered like part of the family. So they made sure those plugins worked all the time. When the core framework was updated, the plugins were updated as well. And at least amongst those 10 or so plugins, you knew that they were there. You could assume that Cordova version 10, those plugins would still exist. That did not work for me with NativeScript. And the first example of that was working with the camera. I was able to get the camera working, but it was painful. Nothing wrong at all. There were a few dock issues I found. I am not very smart, so if you had any issues in your docs, I am the person who will find it. If you are not clear on something, I am the person who will find it. If you're not totally clear on what steps 1, 2, and 3, I am the person who will find the bug between 1 and 2 and complain on Twitter about it. No. Well, yes, I'll do that. I'll also hopefully file a bug report as well. So I had that kind of painful experience both with the camera and file uploads. And those were both things that were just kind of essentially part of the Cordova family and were never an issue. And I don't blame NativeScript at all for that. But not having that family of plugins there was something that I just had to get used to and say, okay, now I need to do a bit more work to find the plugins that I like, the ones that look to be the best documented, best supported, etc. And just essentially kind of keep my own tally of what I could rely on. There are definitely plugin options. Again, I think the next few slides are things that y'all knew, but me kind of coming into it, I had to find this myself. The marketplace with a whole crap ton, 1,000 or so plugins. I was actually kind of shocked at how many there were. And I love that they call out Vue.js support, so I don't have to worry about whether or not a particular plugin supports everything. By the way, raise your hands if you know what every single icon means. Okay, if you don't work for Progress, raise your hands if you know. Yeah, so thankfully they do have the little tooltips. Third one is Webpack. I'm not a Webpack user. Like I don't use it by hand. When the CLI does, then I use it. So I had no idea what that was. And the last one, I thought it was like rumors. Like I've heard something about your plugin, and no, it's just like how popular the plugin. There should totally be like a rumor feature for plugins. Maybe? Okay. All right, so verified. Just discovered this like a couple of days ago. So I kind of mentioned how the Cordova folks, they had that family of plugins that they made sure works. It's nice to see that the NativeScript team also has a similar concept where they do the checking on the plugin. And I looked at their documentation on what they mean in terms of being verified, and it's amazingly well written out, very clear. Other plugin options as well, nsplugins.com, nativescript.rocks. The first one to me seemed like the best option. For the router, don't use it. Oh, question? Oh, 5-minute warning, thank you. For the router, just know, and this is documented, you cannot use the Vue router. You use the manual routing instead. So just know that if you're coming in as a Vue developer. The manual router is also pretty darn easy, so that was not an issue for me at all. That's something that I had to remember. In terms of JavaScript, our favorite framework ever, the good news is that it just works. The bad news is that it's a little bit different. And again, this is nothing wrong per se, and actually this is all very well documented. If you go on the fact, it talks about how NativeScript is using the V8 virtual machine, and blah, 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 blah. We don't read the docs, right? What I ran into is that, I'm writing JavaScript, and it's supposed to work in NativeScript because it works in the browser, right? Not exactly. So what you have, and again, this is not anything bad, just I had to remember, is that the JavaScript syntax, the core, like arrays and things like that, that all works fine. Browser features and APIs that work in the browser won't work in NativeScript except for a few exceptions where the team have added things like fetch. So sensibly, that makes sense. But I can also tell you, like when I'm building a Vue app, I'm not thinking, oh, this is a core language feature and this is a browser API. To me, it's just JavaScript. And coming into NativeScript, it's just something that I have to keep in mind. To be fair, I do the same thing when I'm working with Node.js, right? I can't use a client-side type thing like local storage, etc. in Node.js, but I think coming from Cordova, I just assumed NativeScript was the same. It's not, and that's totally fine. By the way, I have an article coming out for Progress talking about client-side storage options in NativeScript, all based on, oh, that's not going to work. I better find out how. User interface, again, to be clear, this is all kind of spelled out in the NativeScript-Vue page, warning you about having to learn that. This is a bigger deal than I expected. I knew it was different. I knew I couldn't use div tags. I still type div and p and all that and slap myself. It really kind of comes down to looking at the docs, using the heck out of that preview app. Again, I will use the preview app just to test a small UI widget, just to see it running outside of that larger framework. A couple of resources up there, and I'll share these slides later. I'm wrapping up. So in terms of, I guess, any advice I would give if you are just a Vue or web dev, look at the browser features that you may be using and consider what's not going to work in NativeScript and begin looking into plugins. In a similar area, if you are using particular Cordova plugins, you'll want to see what exists and how well they exist in the NativeScript land. And absolutely, start with the UI stuff early, start prototyping, start ensuring that your client is happy with how it looks. Because the UI is all native controls, they should be, but just ensure that you can get the layout that they want. And that is it. Thank you very much.